The wind carried a whisper that morning, the kind that slips through the slats of an old picket fence and brushes against the skin like a warning. John Mitchell stood in his front yard, calloused hands resting on the head of a small shovel, staring at the empty patch of grass near his porch. In his mind, the spot was already home to something sacred, a simple memorial for his fallen comrades, men whose names still lived in his heart, though their bodies had long been taken by the desert sand and the distant echoes of gunfire. It wasn't going to be much, just a small granite stone engraved with a bronze plate and a flower bed beneath it. Not a towering monument, not a flagpole to block the view of anyone's house, just a place to kneel on quiet mornings and remember faces he couldn't forget. But in the world of Pine Ridge Estates, where manicured lawns and identical mailboxes were guarded by the homeowners association like some kind of suburban police state, even the smallest deviation from the rules could draw fire. And the fire came fast. It arrived in the form of Karen Delaney, HOA president and self-proclaimed protector of neighborhood standards. She was the sort of person who believed that her power wasn't complete unless she could see it break someone else. That morning, as John laid out the markers for where he wanted the memorial, she appeared like a storm cloud in beige slacks and a pressed white blouse, her hair pinned so tightly it looked painful. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, dragging out the syllables like they were too heavy for her tongue. "What exactly are you doing?" John turned, leaning slightly on the shovel. "Morning, Karen. Just marking a spot for a small memorial. Nothing big. I'm going to stop you right there. This is Pine Ridge. We have rules. No unauthorized structures, landscaping changes, or personal monuments of any kind. I'm sure you've read the bylaws." "I have," John said calmly. "And this is my yard." "And it's our community," she countered, her voice sharp enough to cut the breeze. "If we let one person put up a tribute, then suddenly everyone will want one. We'll have statues, fountains, maybe even shrines. It's unsightly. It's bad for property values." He stared at her, letting the silence stretch long enough to make her shift her weight. "These men died serving this country. The least I can do is carve out 3 feet of grass to remember them. If property value is worth more to you than their memory, well, that says more about you than it does about me." Her jaw tightened. "If you proceed without approval, the HOA will fine you, and if you refuse to comply, we'll take legal action." He didn't reply then, but something in his expression must have unnerved her, so she lingered a moment longer before walking away, heels clicking like gunfire on the sidewalk. For a week, he tried the official route. He filed an application, wrote a respectful letter explaining the purpose of the memorial, even attached sketches to show how small and tasteful it would be. 3 days later, a formal rejection appeared in his mailbox. The reason? Violates community uniformity standards. He thought of the faces again. Corporal Riley, who once traded his last bottle of water so I could have it. Sergeant Hayes, who joked about going home to build a barbecue pit, only to never make it back. Lieutenant Parker, who could quote Shakespeare while firing an M4 with deadly accuracy. They didn't get rejections. They got folded flags handed to their mothers. That night, John sat at his kitchen table, the letter in one hand, a glass of bourbon in the other. The amber liquid caught the light, glowing like the sand under the Iraqi sun. He wasn't just angry. He was insulted, betrayed by the small-minded arrogance of people who'd never once worn the weight of a helmet or heard the sound of a medic screaming for help over the roar of artillery. By morning, his resolve was set. If they wanted a fight, he'd give them one, but on his terms. Quiet at first, strategic. He began making calls, a local veterans association, an old friend who now worked as a producer for Channel 7 News, another who ran a social media page that could make a story explode overnight. The plan took shape like a military operation. He wouldn't build the memorial in secret. That would just get it torn down. No, he would turn their rejection into a public spectacle they couldn't wriggle out of. The invitation list started small, then grew. Veterans, Gold Star families, local reporters, even a retired general who lived 2 towns over. And on the day the ceremony came, the street outside his house transformed into something the HOA had never imagined.
It began with folding chairs on the lawn, a small podium, and the hum of camera equipment. By the time Karen realized what was happening, it was too late. News vans lined the curb. A handful of uniformed veterans stood at attention. John stood at the podium, his hands resting on its edges, eyes scanning the crowd. Karen pushed through, her face red. "What is this? You can't do this. This is against—" "Sit down, Karen," John said into the microphone, his voice amplified for the whole block to hear. "You'll get your chance to speak. But today, this isn't about you. This is about them." He motioned, and 2 veterans stepped forward, carrying the small granite memorial between them. They placed it on the prepared spot, just as the cameras zoomed in. And then John began to speak. He told stories, not about war in the abstract, but about the real human details, the laughter in a dusty barracks, the way sand stuck to your skin no matter how much you scrubbed, the terrible silence when a convoy didn't return. He said their names. He let the silence after each one linger long enough for the weight to settle on the crowd. When he was done, he stepped aside, letting the Gold Star mothers lay flowers at the base of the stone. Cameras clicked. A drone overhead caught the image, a small, defiant memorial standing proud in the middle of a perfectly groomed suburban lawn. Karen, standing off to the side, knew the HOA had lost before she even opened her mouth, but she tried anyway. "This is a violation of community—" The boos drowned her out. The retired general took the microphone, and with the authority of a man who'd commanded thousands, said, "If this community sees this as a violation, then maybe the problem isn't the memorial. Maybe it's the community." By that evening, the footage had gone viral. HOA bans veteran memorial was trending nationwide. Strangers began sending flowers to John's address. Reporters called for interviews. Local businesses offered to pay the fines on his behalf, and the HOA's inbox overflowed with angry emails. Karen tried to weather the storm, but the damage was irreversible. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. 2 members resigned rather than be associated with her. Petitions circulated demanding her removal. And still, every morning, John knelt by the memorial, the cameras gone now. Just him and the stone, whispering the names of his friends. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The HOA was still threatening legal action. But John knew something Karen didn't. This was only phase 1.
They were easy to recruit. All it took was listening to their stories, validating their frustrations, and suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the HOA didn't have to be the all-powerful entity they thought it was. By the time spring rolled around, John had more than half the neighborhood quietly on his side. Phase 2 began with a letter, not from John, but from a group calling themselves the Pine Ridge Residents for Freedom. It demanded a special HOA meeting to address widespread dissatisfaction with leadership, financial transparency, and the handling of community disputes. Karen dismissed it at first, laughing about it during her morning coffee. But legally, once enough residents signed a petition, the HOA was required to hold the meeting. When the day came, the turnout shocked her. The community center was packed, folding chairs scraping the tile floor as people filed in. Even the ones who hadn't signed the petition showed up, partly for the drama, partly because everyone sensed something big was about to happen. Karen took her seat at the front table, flanked by the remaining board members, her smile tight. She opened with her usual spiel about maintaining standards and protecting property values, but the room wasn't buying it. People began raising their hands, voices rising, recounting stories of unfair fines, arbitrary rules, and the humiliations they'd suffered under her reign. Then, John stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even mention the memorial at first. Instead, he calmly presented copies of financial records, the very documents showing how Karen had used HOA funds for personal gain. He laid them out on a table for everyone to see, each highlighted section like a smoking gun. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably, staring down at the table. Karen tried to talk over him, but the residents weren't having it. The shouts began, calls for resignation, demands for audits, threats to contact the state attorney general. And then, just when it seemed the meeting couldn't get more heated, John played his final card. He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. The wall behind him lit up with a projection, a short video clip from the day of the memorial ceremony. It showed Karen stepping forward, trying to shut it down, as the crowd booed and the general called her out in front of everyone. It wasn't just footage, it was the footage, the one that had gone viral, stitched together with the headlines and social media posts that had shamed Pine Ridge nationwide. "This," John said, turning to the crowd, "is what she's made us known for. Not pride in our community, not respect for the people who built their lives here, but pettiness, greed, and disrespect for the very freedoms our friends died to protect." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. When it broke, it was with a voice from the back. "Vote her out." The chant spread, voices merging into a single demand. The board tried to gavel the meeting back to order, but it was over. That night, a vote was taken. Karen Delaney was removed as president of the Pine Ridge HOA by an overwhelming majority. The new leadership, made up of residents who had stood with John, moved quickly. They rewrote the bylaws, stripped out the most restrictive clauses, and implemented financial transparency measures. Fines dropped. Neighbors started planting gardens, putting up porch swings, and yes, even erecting small, tasteful memorials of their own. Karen moved out within 2 months. Her house sold quietly to avoid further embarrassment. No one missed her. As for John, the memorial stayed exactly where it was, sunlight catching the bronze plate each morning. But something else had changed. On Memorial Day, instead of kneeling there alone, he found the lawn filled with neighbors, veterans, and families. Some brought flowers, others brought stories. A few simply stood in silence, heads bowed. When the ceremony ended that first year, Mrs. Whitaker approached him, wiping her eyes. "You didn't just win your fight," she said softly. "You gave this place its soul back." John looked around at the gardens, the kids playing tag in yards that once had no trespassing signs, the way people lingered to talk instead of hurrying inside, and realized she was right. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. Sometimes it's about making sure the thing they tried to kill lives longer, louder, and freer than they ever imagined.